With all due respect, Master Sergeant, tactics have evolved since your day. The words, slick with the unearned confidence of a brand-new commission, hung in the dry, dusty air of the briefing tent. The platoon chuckled nervously, a low ripple of deference to their leader, the young Lieutenant Kale. In the corner, Master Sergeant Anya Sharma simply gave a slow, deliberate nod. She offered no rebuttal, no flash of anger in her dark, steady eyes. She just stood there, a woman of indeterminate age whose quiet presence was as unassuming as her sterile, rank-only fatigues. To the fresh-faced soldiers of 3rd Platoon, she was a relic, an administrative attachment sent from some higher echelon to observe and report. They saw a ghost, a bureaucrat. But Colonel Evans, watching the pre-mission brief from the back of the tent, saw something else entirely. He saw the way she stood, not at ease, but perfectly balanced. He saw the way her gaze wasn't on the lieutenant, but on the map, her eyes tracing the contour lines of the valley with a familiarity that couldn't be learned in a classroom. He saw the subtle, almost imperceptible way her hands, resting at her sides, were not relaxed, but ready. If you believe that true strength doesn't need to announce itself, type quiet professional below. Lieutenant Kale, armed with a pointer and boundless self-assurance, laid out his plan. It was a textbook maneuver, bold and aggressive, a direct push through the valley to reconnoiter the suspected enemy observation post. It was clean, efficient, and doctrinally sound. It was also, as Sharma knew with the certainty of scar tissue, a perfect invitation to a slaughter. When Kale finished, he asked for questions with a tone that dared any. A silence settled, thick and expectant. It was then that Sharma spoke, her voice low and even, devoid of challenge, yet freighted with experience. Sir, the wadis to the west offer better cover and concealment. The enemy in this sector prefers elevated, interlocking fields of fire. A direct approach through the valley floor funnels us into a natural kill zone. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stated a fact, plain and unadorned. It was this quiet correction that prompted Kale's condescending reply. He saw an old NCO clinging to outdated methods, a remnant of a bygone era. He couldn't see the ghost of a dozen similar valleys reflected in her eyes. He couldn't feel the weight of the knowledge she carried, a legacy paid for in blood and grit. Sharma, in turn, said nothing more. She simply picked up her rifle, its stock worn smooth by years of practiced handling, and fell in at the rear of the formation. Her silence was her dissent. Her compliance was her vigil. The patrol moved out under a bleached white sun, boots crunching in the gravelly dirt. Lieutenant Kale led from the front, his posture radiating the kind of confidence that comes from never having been truly tested. The platoon followed, their youthful swagger a thin veneer over the tension coiling in their guts. They entered the valley just as the lieutenant had planned. The silence was the first warning. Not a peaceful quiet, but a heavy, listening silence. The birds had stopped singing. The air itself felt tight, compressed. Sharma's eyes were constantly moving, scanning the ridgelines, the rock formations, the subtle disturbances in the dust that were invisible to the untrained eye. She saw it a split second before it happened. A flicker of movement, the glint of an optic on the high ground to their left. Then the world exploded. The sharp, tearing sound of a PKM heavy machine gun ripped through the air, followed instantly by the crackle of dozens of rifles. It was a classic L-shaped ambush, perfectly executed. The platoon was caught in the open, pinned down in the center of the kill zone. Men dove for whatever sliver of cover they could find, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. Their return fire was panicked, a wild spray of bullets that found nothing but rocks and sky. In the heart of the chaos, while bullets snapped overhead and the air filled with shouts of fear and confusion, Master Sergeant Anya Sharma was an island of absolute calm. Time seemed to slow for her. The cacophony of battle became a symphony of data points to be analyzed. While Lieutenant Kale was frozen, his face a mask of shock as his textbook plan dissolved into a bloody reality, Sharma moved. Her motions were fluid, economical, and deliberate. She didn't run. She flowed from one piece of meager cover to the next, her M4 rifle a natural extension of her body. Her eyes weren't frantic. They were predatory, dissecting the ambush, identifying key enemy positions, tracking the streams of tracer fire back to their source. She saw the linchpin, the machine gun nest that held the platoon in its deadly embrace. She didn't scream orders. She didn't declare herself in charge. She simply began to work. A controlled pair of shots from her rifle, and a rifleman on the ridge slumped over. Another, and a second went silent. Her actions were so precise, so devoid of wasted energy, that they were almost invisible in the wider storm of violence. She keyed her radio, her voice cutting through the panic chatter with unnerving serenity. Sergeant Miller, shift fire to grid 2-4-59er. Suppress. All elements, break contact west to the Wadi. Move on my mark. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command born of pure, undeniable competence, and the seasoned NCOs, recognizing the voice of salvation, obeyed without hesitation. Colonel Evans heard the contact report over the battalion net, his stomach tightening into a cold knot. The call sign, the location, the frantic, broken transmissions from the platoon's RTO, it was the exact scenario Sharma had quietly predicted. He immediately spun up the quick reaction force, his mind racing. By the time his helicopters touched down near the engagement area, the fight was over. What he found was not the shattered remnants of a platoon he had feared. Instead, he saw a group of battered, exhausted, but living soldiers forming a tight defensive perimeter in the very Wadi Sharma had recommended. He saw shell-shocked faces, but he also saw discipline. He saw order carved from chaos. At the center of it all, moving from position to position, checking ammunition, tending to a wounded soldier, was Master Sergeant Sharma. Her movements were still quiet, still methodical. Lieutenant Kale stood nearby, his face pale, his M4 held loosely in his hands like a foreign object. Evans bypassed the officer and walked directly to Sharma. He didn't need a formal report. The scene told the entire story. He noticed the way she had positioned her men, creating interlocking fields of fire that turned their hasty defense into a fortress. It was the work of a master craftsman. Evans keyed his own handset, his voice hard as steel. "TOC, this is 6. Give me S." 1 inch a moment of static, then a crisp reply. "Sir, I need the full service record for Master Sergeant Anya Sharma, attached to 3rd Platoon. The entire QRF, and what remained of 3rd Platoon, fell silent, listening to the exchange over the ambient radio traffic. The voice from the Tactical Operations Center crackled back, reading from a file that was clearly weighted with classified addendums. Sharma, Anya, Master Sergeant, Primary MOS, 18Z, Special Forces Operations Sergeant. A murmur went through the assembled soldiers. The voice continued, a staccato litany of pure lethality. Previous attachments: Asymmetric Warfare Group, 75th Ranger Regiment, Joint Special Operations Command Task Force, redacted. Combat Deploiement, 12. Awards include Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor Device, Oak Leaf Cluster 3. Purple Heart, Oak Leaf Cluster 2. Mission Profile, Direct Action, Unconventional Warfare, Counterterrorism. The list went on, each entry a testament to a career spent at the absolute tip of the spear. Colonel Evans looked at the quiet, unassuming woman before him, then at the humbled lieutenant. He walked over to Sharma, brought his heels together, and rendered a sharp, perfect salute. "Master Sergeant," he said, his voice ringing with a respect that bordered on reverence. "Thank you for saving my men." The story of what happened in the valley spread through the forward operating base like wildfire. It wasn't just barracks gossip. It became a piece of living folklore, a modern-day parable passed from grizzled sergeants to nervous privates. The legend of the quiet master sergeant who had single-handedly dismantled an ambush and saved an entire platoon became a teaching point. It was a stark reminder that competence wasn't measured in volume or rank, but in action. The name Sharma became shorthand for a level of professionalism that required no introduction. New lieutenants arriving in country were quietly taken aside by their platoon sergeants and told the story. ending with a new, unofficial battalion motto. Before you get bold, ask yourself what Sharma would do. The route through the valley, once designated with a generic code name by Kale, was forever known on unofficial maps and in the minds of the men who fought there as Sharma's Wadi. It was no longer just a place on a map. It was a memorial to a lesson learned in blood, dust, and the deafening silence that follows a moment of perfect, deadly clarity. The most profound change, however, occurred within Lieutenant Kale. The incident had shattered his arrogance, replacing it with a deep and painful humility. A few days after the ambush, he found Master Sergeant Sharma as she cleaned her rifle, her movements as patient and precise as ever. There were no other soldiers around. He stood before her, stripped of his bravado, and spoke with a sincerity he hadn't known he possessed. "Master Sergeant," he began, his voice barely a whisper, "I was wrong. My arrogance almost got everyone killed. There's no excuse." "Thank you." Sharma paused her work, looking up at him. There was no "I told you so" in her eyes, no hint of condescension. There was only a calm, appraising look. "The enemy gets a vote, Lieutenant," she said softly. "The important thing is that you listened when it counted. Focus on bringing the men home. That's the only thing that matters." From that day on, she began to mentor him, not with lectures, but with quiet questions. On patrol, she would ask, "What do you see on that ridgeline, sir?" Or "What does your gut tell you about this village?" She wasn't giving him answers. She was teaching him how to find them himself. She was building a leader, not just correcting a subordinate. Months passed. Master Sergeant Anya Sharma was gone, rotated out as quietly as she had arrived. Her next destination, a secret buried in a classified file. But her legacy remained, woven into the very fabric of the battalion. One evening, Colonel Evans stood before a new group of platoon leaders, fresh to the theater. He didn't yell or intimidate. He simply told them a story about a quiet NCO and an arrogant lieutenant. He held up a copy of the after-action report from that day. "Your training at Benning and Knox gives you the science of warfare," he told the young officers, his gaze sweeping over their eager faces. "But out here, you need the art. And the art of leadership isn't always found in a field manual. Sometimes it's standing quietly in the back of your formation, wearing the same uniform as everyone else. It doesn't have rank or a loud voice. It has experience. Your job, your most important job, is to be wise enough to recognize it and humble enough to listen. True leadership, the kind that forges legends and saves lives, is not about the volume of your commands, but the depth of your competence. It is not about demanding respect through rank, but earning it through action. It is the quiet professional, the silent warrior, whose legacy is not written in reports, but in the lives of those they brought home. It is a testament to the fact that in the moments that matter most, assumptions are worthless and skill is everything. The story of Anya Sharma became more than just a memory. It became a standard, a quiet promise that true worth will always, eventually, be recognized, often in the crucible where it matters most. It is a legacy defined not by what you say, but by what you do when everything is on the line. For more stories where veteran insight triumphs over blind confidence, and where quiet competence defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.